Barney Saunders. I have observed a distinct pattern of behavior among ex-destructive cult members, but particularly among former Scientologists. That is, a predisposition or tendency to produce attack videos. These videos are typically published on YouTube and are directed at an individual or individuals who the ex-cult member feels wronged by or objects to in some way. Do you think that this practice of creating and distributing attack videos of this nature owes to lingering psychological effects of cultic influence? You've said that any person who has been under a cultic influence and way of thinking, particularly if raised as a child in a destructive cult, will continue to think and behave in a certain way for some time after having left the cult. Please note that this question is not looking to explore personality drama. Hey, Barney, thanks for the question here. And so I'm not going to say that people who make attack videos, ex-Scientologists specifically, or what are more commonly referred to in YouTube parlance as response videos, because many of these videos you're referring to or talking about are in response to something that this individual or group of individuals has put out. And so you get these attack responses. And this is a very common thing all over YouTube and is not at all just something that exists or occurs in ex-cult groups or ex-Scientology groups. Here's what I want to say about this as far as the lingering effects of cultic influence on a person's mind after leaving a cult. And I'll just speak from my own personal experience rather than try to project myself onto other people. I'll just tell you what I see and what I hear and what I know and what I've learned. And that is that, you know, we can look at this or approach this from a few different buckets or subjects, right? We can look at this from psychology. We can look at this from neuroscience. You know, the brain it has habits. It has patterns of behavior that become habitual and tendencies and pushes in certain personality directions that become, you know, reinforced by a cult. And so the more authoritarian or more controlling or biased or opinionated, you know, sort of things, attitudes, behaviors are reinforced by a cult. By its very design and nature. They want you thinking along very certain lines, and the language is loaded in order to make you feel that way or think that way. And the entire experience of a cult is, you know, as we know, it goes in that direction. So when you come out of a situation like that, it's not like turning off a light switch. You know, your brain doesn't work that way. You don't have binary decision processes up here where you just get to turn off all that cult experience. It's who you are. It's you know, it's sort of taken over your personality. And Hassan talks about the pre-cult personality in regards to, you know, people who have joined cults in this, you know, at a later age versus those who have grown up in a cult where the cult personality is pretty much indoctrinated into you from the beginning. Not to say you don't have your own personality, because you always do, all of us do, but it's such a monumental part of it as a second generation cult member is the value system and the ethics and moral system and the belief set that is the cult. And you are never consulted about it. So it just kind of is laid in as this is how reality is. When you come out of a situation like that, where you've been in this authoritarian, destructive cult situation, then the patterns of thinking you're going to have developed in this group are going to be along the lines of the snitch culture. Let's talk about Scientology specifically, coming out of Scientology. You have a snitching culture that reports on one another. And even if the person never liked writing reports, even if the person never wanted to rat their friends out, always felt that that was some kind of personal betrayal, they were still in that environment and were still subject to the pressures of that environment. Why didn't you write that up? You need to write that up. Where's the report on it, right? You're constantly questioned about this sort of thing when you're in Scientology is, well, you better write that up. Where's the KR? If you don't write the knowledge report, the KR, then you are just as culpable for the punishment as the person who committed the offense. So you better get to writing. There's a lot of pressure on people in these groups, and this is just one way that this pressure is exerted. So when they come out of that, those pressures still exist in the person's brain. They're still all there. And the reinforcement, the social reinforcement, is the thing that's no longer there. But what ends up happening is similar social pressures or reinforcements start becoming apparent to the person. In other words, they get out in the world, they're acclimating to the world, and they start seeing examples of extremist behavior on, whatever ideological spectrum you want to say. Doesn't really matter. They see these examples of this kind of extremist behavior where people are dictating behavior, dictating belief. This is what people should say. This is what people should think. This is how people should act. We have to have this and this and this. And if that particular extremist is preaching or pushing a dogma that is somewhat similar to the value set that the cult member had before, or is as a value set that the cult member is now picking up on, they will still apply this whole other earlier belief set or value set or way of thinking and acting, in other words, to this new cause. And they'll start acting kind of Scientology-like towards that new cause or new thing. I did this a lot. Okay, and I got called a lot of names for it over the years, and some people have gotten pretty pissed at me over some of the stands that I've taken over things. And sure enough, on review, I was wrong. And I was being very assertive and being very self-important and being very self-right about it because that was the habit. That was what I was inured into being and doing and thinking as a cult member. And so when I've been sitting here for these many years talking about cult recovery, this is one of the things I've been recovering from. And, I've given you guys many examples of things where I didn't know I was doing something until I suddenly, oh, hey, I'm doing this, right? It's like those onion layers coming off. You come out of a cult, and there are layers of belief you have to dive into and deal with, and layers of indoctrination and motivational sayings and mantras and practices and ideas about how the world works. And these can be very, very false, but that's not apparent to you when you first leave the group. So being in a kind of antagonistic, certain, self-important attitude, which is what Scientology really creates in its members, every one of them, all cults really do, you are in the habit of being this way. And so when you adopt a new cause or look at somebody or something and feel disagreement towards that thing, you want to pound it into the ground. You want to make it very clear, very publicly that this is wrong and we're going to, shame or fair game or destroy or whatever terms you want to use. We're going to take this out. We're going to deal with this. We're going to handle it. That's how Scientologists think about that kind of thing, and ex-Scientologists too. And depending on really the amount of time that passes and how much work the person actually honestly puts into sort of shedding those cult behaviors, attitudes, ideas, habits, that's what determines how fast a person sort of gets off that cult bandwagon. And again, I'm just pointing the finger right back at myself here as an example of this, rather than get into the personality wars that go on in this X community and in others. I will simply say, look, I've seen it in myself. I've lots of mistakes I've made, lots of arrogance and conceited statements and nonsense that I've put out there over the years, mostly on social media, not through my channel. I stand by almost everything I've ever posted here on my channel. There are definitely things I got wrong, and I'm willing to admit that. But what I'm talking about more is in the day-to-day interactions with people, more so than, my video content as such. So with these guys, you hit YouTube as an ex-cult member and you see people doing these response videos and you go, that sounds like a good idea. And away you go, And that's a thing that as a YouTuber, I have tended to avoid doing because it does generate drama. It's an attack, right? It's an effort to get the notice and attention of the person you are responding to. That is definitely the goal. If they don't notice or respond, then fine. But if they do, then you got a game. Then you got a war, right? Then you got something to sink your teeth into. And now you got something for the fans to follow, like a tennis game. Ooh, response video, response video, response video. And, and that's a level of activity that a lot of people get into and people here on YouTube love watching. It ain't my gig. It's not my thing. I don't want to, I avoid it. I don't want to get into personality drama and conflicts, as you guys know. And every time I've regretted it because I've, stepped my foot into something and people are pissed at me now. And I don't like people pissed at me, but anyway, that's kind of what happens with this. So in all of that answer, I think you kind of get where I'm going with this, that it's, that these lingering effects are serious. They are significant. They are sometimes a chore to deal with. And so, the answer to your question is yes, I do believe that the lingering effects, the psychological effects of cultic influence can have an effect on that. But I will stress that response and attack videos are not only because of cultic influence. Obviously, there's lots of people on YouTube who have made these things who've never been anywhere near a cult. So, at least not the kind of cults we're talking about. All right. So, anyway, I hope that addresses the question in a useful and informative way, Barney. And let me know if you want more.